Well, can you hear me, Beth?
Yes.
Alexi, can you hear me?
All clear on this end.
Okay, it looks like we're starting a little early because I don't know why, but my timer just shut right down. So that happens, I guess, and that's that. So, hey, I hope you both are so incredibly well that you can't even stand it. Tell me that's true.
We're getting there.
Okay, got it. All right. Well, listen, folks. I hope that you all are well. I'm Tim Freitas from the Garden of English. I am joined by Beth Hall from Coach Hall Writes, and I'm also joined by Alexi Dar, who is our moderator for today. Beth, why don't you introduce yourself? Just tell us where you're from, what you do. Alexi, you do the same thing, and then we'll get this show on the road.
All right, absolutely. Hi, everybody. My name is Beth Hall. I go by Coach Hall Writes on YouTube, TikTok, pretty much every other social media platform. And I am an AP Lang teacher from Arkansas.
All right, Lexi, tell us about you.
My name is Alexi Dar. I am an AP Lang teacher in West Virginia. I am not on socials aside from helping these guys out whenever they occasionally need it.
No, and I really appreciate that. So, folks, just so you all know what Alexi is here for, and not just to be a good friend, is to moderate what we have going on in the chat. So, to be clear, if you are being respectful in the chat, you will be allowed to stay in the chat. But if you are being disrespectful in the chat, Alexi is going to kick you right out with no warnings for good. Mrs. Hunt. And then someone's here from New Mission in Boston. Now, folks, you might not know this and you might not even care, but I recently moved from Massachusetts to Las Vegas. And I have to admit, I have to admit, I don't miss Massachusetts at all. So I take it all back. But if you're in Boston, I hope you're living the dream over there. And that's that. So anyway, Mrs. Hunt, shout out to Ms. Flint. Let's see, who else? Dr. Newton. Omens class. Someone from Hilton Head Island, pretty awesome. You know what, Beth? Every year we get this last name, Spisz, and I never remember how to say it. Do you remember? What is that phonetically?
Oh, now I can't remember. Is it maybe they could help us in the chat because they come every year. We always get so excited, but every year we say it
I
wrong.
know.
I
Is
want
it
to
I
say
know.
it's Spees,
Maybe it
but
is.
I
I don't
feel so
remember.
bad because again,
Well,
yeah, we
well,
also got a
while
surprise guest back here, so he'll be showing up from time to time.
oh, that's totally fine. Let's see. We've got Ms. Derwitz. Shout out from Mrs. Smith. Shout out. Let's see. Uh, let's see. Mrs. Albanetti, Ms. Brown. So, folks, if you have the best AP Lang teacher, put that teacher's name in the comments, and we're going to try our best to actually get that shouted out. But we do have things that we have to do. So anyway, Beth, we're here. We're ready to talk. And I don't know if you saw this in the YouTube live, but I actually put a little poll out there, and I was like, "Hey, how confident are you with multiple choice?" And believe it or not, 53% of the kids that are responding, or participants that are responding, are saying that they'll be okay. It's
good?
I'll be okay. Well, it says I'll be okay, but that seems to be the biggest kind of thing here. So we're gonna start here. Um, and shout out to Ms. Quam or Quam. I don't know how to say that right. Shout out to Ms. Brown as well. But anyway, we want kids not to be cooked. So I am thrilled to know that most of the students are not saying that they're going to be cooked. So that's a great thing. But we're going to give people strategies anyway here. So the way that this is going to work today, folks, is we're going to start by talking about multiple choice and just some strategies for multiple choice. And then we're going to shift towards rhetorical analysis. So whatever questions you want to put in the chat, we really want them to be about multiple choice and rhetorical analysis. Our next session, which will be on April 30th, will be about synthesis and argument. And then, of course, we'll come back for our our exam cram the night before, which is fine. But with that being said, Beth, let's start with your best tip after we give a shout out to Mrs. Dar, who's right here anyway, and Ms. Glavin as well, and Mrs. Zimmerman. So if you could summarize your best tip for multiple choice? I'll let you talk about a million of them in a minute, but a kid comes in and says, I just am struggling with multiple choice. What the crap do I do? Beth, what is your
Okay, so I think my best tip would be for students to know which types of questions they're struggling with. Because honestly, a lot of my students tend to do better with those writing MCQs, which are passages 3, 4, and 5. And if they dislike anything, the thing that they hate is they hate when it's like an old passage. And for them, old is like pre-1900.
Beth,
Like,
hold on, pause, time out. Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, I need you to restart because you.
Hey, it's freezing on my end, but it's you. Alexi, is he freezing for you?
Yeah, he's freezing on this end every so often as well.
Okay. Can people let us know in the chat who's freezing? Is it me or is it Tim?
That's the hard part. Someone's freezing.
Okay, well, I think it's fixed for now. Should I start over?
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Super sorry. I'm gonna go make sure nobody's streaming other stuff in here.
Okay, sounds good. I'll tell you about multiple choice then. Okay. So one of the things that, first of all, let's talk about multiple choice because sometimes students don't really know like what they're even up against. And so students, you have 1 hour to answer 45 multiple choice questions. And as of last year, it's now just 4 answer choices and not 5, which I am personally very grateful for because 5 was a lot. And so the first 2 passages are the reading ones. Those are like the ones where it's kind of like rhetorical analysis questions, like the purpose. They might ask you about the exigence. They might ask you about why the writer's making certain choices. And you tend to get about 10 to 13 questions for those. And those passages, admittedly, are a little bit more dense. Whereas passages 3, 4, and 5, those are the writing MCQ, which means it's kind of like editing. My students tend to like those better. They feel like they're slightly easier. They feel like they don't take as long. So one of the tips that I give my students is we look at any practices they've done. So for my students, that's usually going to be the AP classroom progress checks. And I think they've done 2 of the practice exams. We have another one coming up. And so we look at their data and we look at like which types of questions they're struggling with. Sometimes it's a little of everything. Sometimes it's a very key thing, and we try to focus in on that. So that would be my best advice initially, is to figure out where your strengths are and where you might be struggling, because multiple choice has a lot of facets to it. And so usually there's something that we're good at, and we want to lean into those questions on test day, right? Because in case you guys aren't aware, the 45 questions, they're essentially 1 point each. And so even if you're just guessing, you want to make sure that you're answering each question because you could get it right. And so we want to make sure that we're focusing on what our strengths are and then trying to zero in on those weaknesses. And so for my students, that tends to be looking at some of those reading ones, especially with the passages that seem harder.
Okay. Beth, you can hear me, right?
Yes. Yeah, you're not frozen anymore.
Okay. So I just had all my children turn off what they were streaming and whatnot, so we should hopefully be okay. If I repeat any of the strategies that you had just mentioned, please stop me in the middle of it, right?
No, you're fine. I just gave an overview of what MCQ was.
Gotcha. Shout out to Ms. Smith, by the way, who from Noel as well. So shout out to Ms. Smith from Noel, who happens to be the best Lang teacher, although Ms. Brown is getting a lot of support here too. So wow, Ms. Smith is really getting a lot though, and Mr. Suffix as well. So anyway, there we go. When we take care of the multiple choice here, Beth, what is the most daunting process besides the archaic reading? I'm going to talk about strategies for building reading skills up until test day in just a minute. But what's the most daunting part of the multiple choice reading besides an archaic text?
I think sometimes, from what I've seen, because I'm not sure if you're looking for a very specific answer here or not, but one of the things besides the archaic text, I think sometimes students get a little bit overwhelmed. And one of the things that I'm really working with my students on is going back to the passage. A lot of times they think they remember it. And I'm like, no, go back and double check. Same for the ACT, which is what my students take. I'm like, go back to the passage, find your answers, make sure you're reading the appropriate section, because there's a lot of answer traps. You and I have talked about this before. There's a lot of answer choices that are like really, really close. And so it's easy to fall for those if you're not reading closely.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about some of those common distractor qualities in just a couple minutes there. Good. Now, folks, one of the things that I talked to about reading strategies for multiple choice is the first problem is I mean, Beth, let's be real. If a kid is not an active reader, is that student going to be positioning him or herself to really do well on the multiple choice? It doesn't mean you can't if you're not an avid reader, but you know, would I do better on my multiple choice if I was a strong and avid reader, Beth?
Well, absolutely. It's kind of like, I mean, if I were, let's say I played basketball, I would practice my foul shots. I wouldn't just wait till game day to be like, oh, I hope it goes in.
Right, absolutely. And so I think that a lot of times one of the easiest ways that students can really become better readers is by doing it a little bit more. Now, we only have a month and a half, and that's just the first basic step, but we only have about a month and a half until exam day. So, I'm not going to necessarily become a better reader overnight. But let's say a student's like, hey, I really want to become a better reader. And without other tips, like test taking tips, what would you encourage that student to read? Because I mean, I read text messages a lot. I read, social media a lot. What would I do? What should I do? And what should I be reading? Do you have any suggestions? And I'll give a couple suggestions, and then we'll get to some multiple choice test taking tips.
Well, I think it's important for students to remember that AP Lang is nonfiction. So we want to be reading nonfiction passages. And realistically, I would say start with topics that you're already interested in, because if you find it boring, you're not going to want to read it. And it could be some sort of like maybe start with like a newspaper article. Those are not necessarily like the same caliber of text, but it's better than nothing. We want to ease our way into it. You can look into like obviously like a nonfiction book, and that kind of thing. But I've found that when students get to read stuff that's that higher caliber of text, but it's something they're interested in, it helps. And I think a benefit of that, if we were doing it between now and the exam, is that you might be able to use it on Q3, depending on the prompt, of course.
Of course, right? So while we segue into what I was about to talk about, shout out to Mrs. Siznicki. And once again, Miss Smith. Miss Smith is getting shout outs like crazy. But sure enough, Mrs. Siznicki, if I said that incorrectly, please forgive me. But we do have a couple questions in the chat before we actually address them, though. I want to just say, if you want to become a better reader right now and you're looking for ways to do so, I really encourage you to read National Geographic. And the reason why is because it's a little bit boring at times, but the writing is so good and it's contemporary. And the more you can work through an article like that, the better stamina you're going to build, and you're going to be working with really complex texts. Another good one is Sports Illustrated. So if, let's say you're a sports fan, the cover articles for Sports Illustrated are actually written really well. So those are kind of my initial go-tos where it's like, I have to read something. I don't even know where to begin. What should I do? Go to your library and ask for the latest cover or the latest National Geographic. Sorry, I just had a blank there because I was thinking about the question that came in. Now, before we get some strategies about like multiple choice answers and whatnot, someone just asked, do we have any tips to pace ourselves on our reading? Or, what if we're a slow reader? What do we do?
That's a really good question because I think a lot of people can relate to that. And so there's a couple different strategies that come to mind, but you need to practice them. I know for me personally, I've learned through practice kind of how to like speed read and kind of skim when needed. Also, I personally have found that I need to be more engaged with the text. And so we know that the exam is digital. So I personally would maybe be taking like notes or annotations, and that you might think, okay, but that slows you down. But if you're engaging with the text and it's helping you understand it, then it could be worth it. So students might benefit from like highlighting or adding comments. I also think sometimes like what you annotate is important because like for instance, are we looking for like, the main idea, that kind of thing, as opposed to I don't know. I've seen kids annotate where it's just they just put like a smiley face. That might not be the most practical thing to do on test day. So that would be just something to consider is like, and also like you said, just by doing it, you might naturally get faster. I think something else to consider too, though, is that on test day, you're going to be a little bit stressed out anyway. Even if you feel very prepared, it's natural to feel a little bit of anxiety on test day. So I personally try to simulate that as best I can by like giving my students timed practice, simply because it's kind of like, to use a sports analogy, it's kind of like a scrimmage. Like you want to simulate test day a little bit. And I think sometimes if we feel like we're a slow reader and we're adding the stress of test day, it can make it a little bit harder. So what tips do you have?
Yeah. So first of all, you can hear me better now or no?
To me, it's the same, but I wasn't having problems hearing you before though.
Okay, no problem. So I think still it's SPISZ coming in the chat, and I still don't know how to say it.
I think it's spies. I'm gonna go with spies, but I could be wrong.
Gotcha. All right. So shout out to Mrs. Spies. Shout out to Mrs. Quam again. And then tell me if my volume got better, folks. I tried to switch my microphone. Ms. LaRoe, and then Mr. Sefik, and then I hope I shouted out somebody else. There was another. Did I already shout up Mrs. Saznicki? I hope so. Anyway, so when it comes to these kind of tips here for slow readers or for pacing yourself, right? Somebody also asked, do we think it's better to skim the reading or thoroughly read it? Well, you want to read it. I suggest that you don't practice now by reading some kind of, I don't know, frustrating.
Okay, I think they cut off again. I think you're like cutting in and out. Yeah. But we did get a pronunciation. I think it's Spees. Someone spelled it phonetically in the chat. So that teacher, let us know if Spees is right. We want to say the name right because y'all show up every year.
Oh my gosh, what the heck is going on here? All right, hold on.
I can hear you clearly, but they're saying they can't.
I can't even hear you.
Okay. Do you want me to continue? Okay, well, y'all, while we're dealing with the technical difficulties, let us know in the chat which multiple choice questions you have. And that way we can answer them. And then while Tim's figuring it out, I'll try to tackle some of the questions that are coming through just so that we don't have any downtime because your time is valuable. So we appreciate that.
Beth, I just saw one question come through that asks, should you treat the reading portion almost like the reading portion of the SAT?
Oh, that's a really good question because the SAT now has those shorter passages. So in some sense, yes, there actually is a little bit of overlap there, but at the same time, they are very different because the SAT is now those paragraph questions and then you move on, which actually I personally like the new format of the SAT. But the skills are the same, and actually the SAT might be good practice if you're looking for quick practice, just because some of those texts are a higher caliber. So in some sense, yes. If I'm understanding the question, there is a little bit of overlap.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Okay, let's see if anybody, there's a little bit of a delay in the chat, so hopefully they can answer.
Oh my gosh. Beth, can you hear me now or no?
I can hear you, yes.
All right, I think that I just hardwired my computer in. My Wi-Fi was cutting out. We're going to see.
Okay, so
Ah.
here's a really good question. Well, I want you to finish what you're saying about like reading the passage, but someone basically asked, can we talk about how to differentiate between the similar answers? So I think going over the answer traps would be really good.
Yes. Okay. Let's see. Is my volume still super low? Oh my gosh.
One person said it's still low, and someone said bad Wi-Fi.
Yeah, seriously, bad Wi-Fi for sure. Gee, what the heck? I'm gonna try
Okay.
changing my microphone. Yeah.
Well,
So anyway, why don't you talk about lead distractors while I try to figure out my microphone? How does that sound?
Perfect. I will do that. Okay. So lead distractors, you've probably seen them and you might have fallen for them once or twice, and that's okay because it happens. But a lead distractor is basically that answer choice that is close, but it's not the best answer, right? So it's like the one that we might choose instead of the correct one. And so here are some of the ways that they make wrong answers. One of them is that the answer choice is mostly correct, but it's not entirely correct. So, for instance, like one singular word can make the entire answer choice wrong. So I'm thinking of like some of the practice questions that are publicly available, and there's one that I'm thinking of where the question is about tone, and it says like the speaker's talking about, and then it's the right topic but the wrong tone word. So like the answer choice is half right, half wrong because the topic was right and the tone is wrong. So if the answer is half right, it's still the wrong answer, right? It has to be 100% right. So be careful where a singular word could make something wrong. Because what I've noticed is if you read the answer choice too quickly, you might not pay attention to that one singular word. So that's one type of lead distractor is where it's partially correct, but therefore still wrong. The reason why this is tricky is because sometimes we talk ourselves into the wrong answer because we're like, oh, well, this is partially right. Maybe I misunderstood. So half right is still wrong. Another type of like distracting answer is when they get way too broad or like way, way, way too specific. And so that's something to be mindful of as well. Um, and then, just to answer the question that just popped up in the chat, someone asked, will this be posted afterwards? And yes, it'll be on Tim's Garden of English channel. So this channel, after, so you can rewatch it if you need to. Other types of lead distractors, we talked about half right. We talked about how it can be too broad or sometimes too specific. There's also, I would say, some where it's true, but it's not actually answering the question being asked. I see this one a lot
Yeah.
because it's like one way that we see it is, let's say they're asking you about paragraph 2. One of the answer choices might be somewhere in the passage, but it's in like paragraph 4. And what they do, at least in my opinion, is they pick something that is memorable about the text. And so your mind is like, yeah, I remember reading that. And then you want to pick that answer. But instead, you really need to go back to the passage and make sure that it's the part that they're talking about. So that's one thing that they do is they give you an answer choice that is true, but it's not actually answering the question being asked. So
All
I
right.
think those are the main ones. Tim, you have a video about distractors, right? If I remember correctly.
I do. And can you hear me now?
Yes, and you're louder on my end, so hopefully
Okay.
that helps people.
I hope so. That will be good if that's what happens. Yeah, so when it comes to the lead distractor, I always want to. I think the one that's the hardest for kids is they get that half the partially wrong answer, and because of that, I think you nailed it, right? If there's one word wrong, it's the whole word that's wrong. And so, because of that, you have to really just go back and look at the line numbers. Now, one other strategy for multiple choice is on the AP exam, it's going to highlight your line numbers for you. But typically, the answer to that question that has those line numbers is found in the lines before or the lines after. And so you really need to know the context of the question in order to answer it well with the inference. Folks, I am so sorry for the technical difficulties that we were having. Next time I'm going to plug in my computer right away and I'll change my microphone right away. So please forgive me there, folks. And I'm glad that I'm louder now. So that's good. One other thing, though, that for students that want to actually like start practicing reading, because they want to get better for test day, I'm going to actually encourage students. Oh, gee, my stupid computer screen. This is crazy. I don't know. Today's not my day. But anyway, to do this, what I'm going to encourage kids to do is when they read, they really want to start trying to build in 5 core questions to answer while they read. Okay? And what I mean by that is while you're practicing reading for the next month and a half, every time you read something, what I want to encourage you to do is I'm going to encourage you to periodically stop and ask yourself these 5 questions that I'm about to tell you. Okay? And I'll actually put them in the chat too. I'll copy and paste them into the chat as we speak. So I encourage my students, right, and actually everybody to just take a moment and always ask themselves what's going to show up here. It's too much to put in the chat. I'll put it in 2 separate ways in a minute. I encourage kids to ask themselves, I'm going to read a little bit, and I'm going to say, can I find out something about the speaker's background, values, or beliefs from this section? If the answer is yes, that's good. If the answer is no, then that means that information wasn't in that section, and we move on. Next question I encourage students to read for. Can I find out anything about the audience's background, value, beliefs, desires, or needs based on this section? Yes or no? And then we move on to, okay, can I find out from this section of text what the audience should experience emotionally? If the answer is yes, you mark down that emotion. Then you ask, can I find out from this particular section anything about the speaker's argument or why it's important to talk about it right now and why it's urgent to talk about it now? And the last one is, when I read this section of text, can I explain how it relates to any other section of text that I'm reading? All of those questions, there are 5 of them. Every multiple choice question is answering a variation of one of those 5 questions. So I'm going to put those 5 questions in the chat. And if kids practice reading that, so they read an article, they break it into sections, and they say, okay, in this section, how many of these 5 questions can I answer? If they can practice it, or should I say students, if you can practice that and focus on that, on answering these questions, you're going to be able to answer almost all of your multiple choice questions because you're going to be reading with a rhetorical effect in mind. And even for the writing questions, that's what you're being asked about. What's the rhetorical effect of a writer making a choice here? And so here, let's try to put this. Let's try to see if I can get these actually into the chat. Okay. So Beth, tell me what's going on. Where do we need to go now?
So we had a good question from Ava. Ava wants to know, how should you approach a question that has vocabulary you are unfamiliar with, either in the question or the answer choice?
That's a great question. Wow. Beth, I think, how many years have we been doing this? And I don't think we've ever been asked that question before.
We've never been asked that. And I think that's a great one because I think it also applies to like other standardized testing as well.
Yeah, 100%. So I'll let you address that first while I'm copy and pasting, and then I'll give my answer.
Okay, so this one's, I think, a little bit tricky. I would say, first of all, try to find context clues. And if you're not sure what the word means, at least start with like maybe connotation. Do we think it has a, yeah, like, do we think it sounds positive or negative? Like, even if we don't know what exactly it means, we can start there with, is it positive or negative? And that can kind of help. And then the other thing is, I guess if this is more if it's in the passage, not necessarily if it's in the question. But I would say, if you're reading, don't let a singular word slow you down, because chances are you can get the gist of it without. Now, if it's in the question or the answer choice, let's start with if it's in the question. There are some words that students might not be familiar with. One of them is exigence. I've seen that be on multiple choice questions before. And it's kind of hard to answer a question about exigence if you don't know what the word means. So by the way, if we don't know, exigence is like the catalyst. It's like the impetus. It's like the spark. It's like why, the immediate reason why they're speaking or writing. So if we don't know, then I think we need to try to like use context clues as best we can. If it's in the answer choice, I would say make sure that before you pick that one, that you've eliminated all the other ones that have the words that you do know. Because I think sometimes people want to automatically pick the answer choice with the harder word in it because they're like, oh, this must be right. And it's not that it's not true, it's just that it's not always true.
For sure. For sure. Let's look at the other question that we have here. So the vocab one, the best advice that you just gave it, right? Honestly, find the connotation of the word. Do we know if it's at least positive or negative? And what's really nice about that too, wait, Beth, I'm not frozen, am I?
No, you're good.
Oh, good. Okay. I'm super nervous about that now. The best thing about the connotation one is that if the question is referring to a section of the text in your reading that's connotatively positive, and you can figure out that the answer is connotatively negative, even though you don't necessarily know what it means, you can know that that's the wrong answer. So when you work with vocab, folks, and if you don't know what connotation means, Beth, did you define connotation?
I don't think I actually did, no.
Okay, so just so you all know, connotation is like the emotional baggage that comes with words, right? So, folks, if I were to say, I'm going to slap somebody or I'm going to punch somebody, which one is more negative? It's going to be the word punch, okay? I could say I'm going to verbally reprimand you, or I could say I'm going to viciously scream at you, and the viciously scream is more negative. And the reason why is because there's more emotionality that's tied to it. Okay, I could say that I'm happy, but then I could also say that I'm elated. Elated is significantly more positive. So that's kind of how connotations work here. Okay, Ms. LaRoe. Oh, huge shout out to Ms. LaRoe. A bunch of them. Ms. Smith again. Gee, Ms. Smith is really where a lot of Ms. Smith there. Mrs. Reed as well. So sorry, just wanted to catch up with that. But before we switch gears to rhetorical analysis type of stuff, I would like to point out that there was a question that came in that said, there was a question about writing multiple choice. We'll deal with that in 1 second. But this idea of the exigence, right? How do you read for exigence if you don't really, like if it's not clear? How do you help your kids read for exigence as opposed to context?
Yeah, that's a good question because they are separate things. And someone actually asked in the chat to clarify exigence versus purpose, because I think those kind of sometimes accidentally get conflated as well. So the way I like to think of we've got three terms here. Context, I like to think of it as like big picture. A lot of students are familiar with the term historical context. So depending on the passage, sometimes the historical context is more obvious than others. Like, let's be honest. So I asked my students, okay, what do you know about what was happening before this that's relevant, during this time period, and after? And sometimes we can infer context from the passage itself. Sometimes it's in the prompt. So we want to make sure we're reading the prompt closely as well, because the College Board does try to give us the information that we need, I think, or at least, for the most part. So the context is like big picture. The exigence is like the immediate reason. And so it's like to use the idiom, it's like, I don't know, the straw that broke the camel's back. I don't know if that's the best idiom, but it's like the spark, right? So and then purpose is like the goal, like it's what they're trying to achieve. So usually when I'm teaching purpose, I tell my students that it needs to be a verb, like to encourage or to inspire. Obviously, we want to be more specific than that on test day, but it's the goal. It's like, what they're trying to do. So some passages are going to have a more obvious exigence than others. Like for instance, if it's a eulogy, like a funeral speech, somebody had to have passed away in order for the speech to be necessary. If it's a commencement speech, right? There's a graduation ceremony happening. But in other passages, like I'm thinking of the passage, well, one of them on last year's exam, I think the author's last name might be Truer. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but my students, they were like, I didn't totally know what the exigence was. So they said, and I quote, I leaned into the other parts of the rhetorical situation. And I was like, and that's exactly what you should do on test day.
Yeah. And, another great way and a simple way to think about context and exigence is I'm going to just talk about a birthday party, right? So if I'm throwing a birthday party for a friend of mine or one of my 5 kids or anything like that, right? The exigence of planning the party is the fact that it's a birthday. Like that's what sparked this, and then the purpose of that, though, is for that person or that child to be celebrated. You cannot confuse the two. It's not like they're the same thing. So you were born, it's your birthday, great, and now that's inspired me to make sure that you feel like you're being celebrated by us. And so that's kind of the nature of that in a more simplistic form, as opposed to the academic ones that you gave, which were fine, by the way. I'm not trying to criticize that. I'm just saying in a more simplistic sense. Now, let me look here before we... shout out to Mrs. Clark. Shout out to Mrs. Albanetti. And I think that we're caught up for the most part there. Now let's talk about the writing questions real quick, just before we shift over to rhetorical analysis. But I do have to put a little ad in here before we get into rhetorical analysis, so just a heads up on that. But the writing questions, someone asked, how do you handle those questions that ask for like the best form of a sentence? Like, are there any like strategies that you could, or like ways that you prepare your kids for the writing questions that are different than the reading questions? Because they are still rhetorical questions. Let's see rhetorical effect of what's going on here. But is there anything that you do for your kids where you're like, you know what, make sure that you know this because it's going to help you on the writing section?
Well, I think, first of all, these writing questions, I think it helps if we realize that the passage is a draft. Like it literally says that above it. And so your role is almost like editor. So you need to think about the purpose that they're trying to achieve. Like, for instance, if they say the writer wants to choose an engaging opening. Okay, well, any answer choice that is dull is not engaging, so we can get
For
rid of
sure.
those, right?
Yeah.
So, like, there's usually a couple that you could toss out. They ask questions about, like, and they do this on the ACT as well. The writer wants to add this sentence. Should they do so? And you kind of have like the yes or no, or sometimes it's like keep it or delete it. For those, the strategy I tell my students is to basically decide yes or no before you read the answer choices and then try to think of why. Because usually, if they can do it without getting distracted by the answer choice that they end up choosing is similar to their thought process. So those I think can get a little tricky, but with practice, you kind of get used to it. And then of course there's ones that are like transition words. Again, those are also on the ACT. So for any of you and the SAT still, if any of you are taking the SAT or the ACT, there's a few little like question types that overlap with AP Lang. So if you're ever like struggling to find practice questions, sometimes studying for the ACT or the SAT can help a little bit too. But I think it's important to remember the purpose of these questions. You are essentially the editor. So read the questions very carefully because usually they are very specific about the goal that they're trying to get you to achieve.
Yeah. And one of the things that I really encourage my kids to make sure that they know to really help them with their writing questions is know how to use a semicolon correctly, know how to use a colon correctly, and then know what coordination and subordination are.
Yes.
So the reason why, folks, is because you're going to get a writing question that says the author wants to make sure that both ideas in the sentence are conveyed equally. Which answer is best to do that? Well, equal ideas is what's called coordination. You can coordinate by having a comma and a coordinating conjunction, a semicolon, a colon, or a semicolon, conjunctive adverb, and a comma. So if you know what the coordinating conjunctions are or how to coordinate sentences, when you see the answers that subordinate sentences, you know they're wrong. That's going to eliminate at least two answers right away if you just know what coordination and subordination are. Subordination is when you want to make ideas seem less equal. So if I say, although I hate pizza, I ate some yesterday, although I hate pizza is less important than the fact that I ate some yesterday. So folks, you definitely want to know coordination and subordination. Now, somebody in here did ask, how can you distinguish between an answer that's supported by the passage and one that's just sounds reasonable? Beth, might have to answer that question.
Yes, that's a good one. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a great question. The easiest way to do it, folks, is you can tell if an answer is supported by the passage because you can actually take your finger and put it on the screen where you can develop the inference with the textual evidence. So I've been known in the past to tell my kids, you got to give your test the finger, this one, and you just put your finger right on where the evidence actually is. And if you can't put your finger on the evidence of where the answer is actually directly stated, or where you're like, that is the language where I inferred this to be the correct answer, then it's most likely not the right answer. So substantiated answers, you can just say, there's the evidence for it right there.
Well, and to build off of that, there's also times where that's a good test for the lead distractor as well, because if you were to like say color code it, the right answer is going to have more color coded parts than a distractor. The distractor might be one tiny part, but the right answer, if you were highlighting, would have more too. So similar concept there as well.
For sure. Now, I am trying to figure out why can't I do. Man, there's some things that like I can't do right now because of the technology in my house. This is the first time I've ever live streamed from this particular room in my house, and so I'm like, where do I find this crap? There we go. All right, here we go, folks. We're going to start shifting gears a little bit to talk about rhetorical analysis, which is part of the kind of reading process anyway. But while we do that, I have to just show you a couple things here. One of the ways that we can continue to keep these things free is because we have sponsored ads and things like that. So just real quick, if you're looking to get some great exam review, please note that the Garden of English does have lang support for AP English students, which covers all of what you need to know for your class. A great review. There's over 180 multiple choice questions in there. There's 2 practice exams. You can take a third one with applied practice if you want to. So just know you can grab that right there. I'll put the link in the chat in just a couple minutes. On top of that, I'd like to just point out that supported tutoring is also a program that helps sponsor things like this. So you can check out supported tutoring if you're looking to get some more tutoring involved in what you're doing here for AP and whatnot before exam day. The last thing is, for teachers that might be involved, we have Garden of English workshops for all types of teachers for this summer. So we encourage you to consider checking those out. Please note that any school who sends 3 to 5 teachers gets a $150 discount per enrollment. And then if they send 6+ teachers, we are happy to give them over $200 off for their professional development per enrollment. So just a heads up on that. We'll share that again at the end. I'll put the links in the chat, but we are going to shift gears just a little bit unless there is another question that came through that we should definitely read. Should I read the whole passage then answer the questions, or read the questions and read portions of the passage for time's sake? Beth, we can't move on before answering that question. I gotta hand that over to you.
Oh goodness. Okay. I think you and I sometimes have different strategies for this because
Yes.
I personally, the way my brain works, I do better on a paper test if I read the questions and then I go to the passage because I know what I'm looking for. I personally have not tried this with the digital test, so I can't say. So I know most students read the passage first, then look at the questions. I tell my students to try both methods and figure out which way works for them. But I do think that reading the questions first on a digital exam is harder because it's a lot of clicking. And so I think most people would probably advocate for reading the passage first and then going to the questions. And as you're answering the questions, going back to the passage. I think that's how most people approach it. But personally, I would just say try the method that's going to work best for you because it's a little bit different for everybody.
Yeah, that's the best advice, right? Because for me, I'm reading the whole thing, and then I'm just going to go answer the questions, and I'm going to just crank it, right? But if I talk to someone like you, or I talk to someone like Dr. Brandon Abden, what normally ends up happening is Brandon's like, I really appreciate just quickly nabbing the stems just to look at the words that are in the stems so that I could think about that as I'm reading. For me, I've kind of like tried to train my brain to always cycle through those 5 questions that I brought up earlier. And because I read everything like that, I know that I'm pretty much covered with my multiple choice questions there. So that's kind of that. Other questions, Beth, before we move on to talking about rhetorical analysis?
I was just checking the chat. We got a lot of shout outs from Ms. Roland.
Oh yeah, Ms. Roland, heck yes.
So I think we've answered just about everyone. Now, some of these people have asked a question that we answered previously. They might not have been on. So just as a general rule, first of all, this is going to be reposted on, not reposted, but posted on Tim's channel later. It takes usually about an hour or so. So you can go back and watch it. Also, we have done these lives for how many years now? Is this year 4 or 5? I can't remember.
Beth, this might be year 5.
I think this is year 5.
Actually, if we started in 2020, Beth, this might be year 6. I don't know. It's been a while.
We need to figure that out.
Yeah.
It's been a while. Tim and I both have videos for not only multiple choice, but all 3 essay types. And Tim actually has like lit videos and other stuff as well. I have some ACT and SAT videos. And so if there's a topic that you're struggling with, like if you're like, what's a rhetorical choice or how do I write a paragraph? we have videos that go into more detail as well. So it's not that we're trying to ignore questions. It's just that some of these questions we've either already answered tonight or might be better in a long form video. And so just we appreciate that support as well too, going and checking out our channels.
Yes, and then on top of that, somebody just asked about lit reviews like this, and the lit review schedule will be released on Sunday, folks. So we'll post that to teachers and on social media and things like that. Okay. Somebody did ask a synthesis question. We're not going to deal with the synthesis question today, folks. That's going to be on April 30th when we cover synthesis and argument. So just a heads up on that. And so because of that, I just wanted people to know. I want to just let people know that's the case. Now, it just so happens, Beth, that we're going to start shifting a little bit to rhetorical analysis. And of course, I gave, hey, we're going to cook on rhetorical analysis. No, I'm cooked on rhetorical analysis, or it's okay, meh, and 57% are in the meh, So we're going to shut that down right now. Beth, tell me about the rhetorical analysis element here that's the hardest. So, well, what do you got?
I think the hardest part for students is the commentary. Having read, let's see, I've done synthesis at the AP reading for the past 2 years. I'm really hoping for something different this year. But
me too. Me too.
Like, I'm sorry, but I hate reading synthesis for that many hours. It's my least favorite if I had to pick one. But I love doing rhetorical because it's my favorite. But when I read rhetorical essays, the biggest mistake I see students making is that they are not providing enough commentary. There is commentary there. It just might be a little bit superficial. And so we want to be connecting to whatever the prompt is asking, the message, argument, or purpose, but more deeply. We want to be considering the rhetorical situation. So those questions that you gave earlier about, the speaker's background or values or beliefs, and then the audience's, teachers might know this, but that's actually one of our AP Lang standards. And so I tell my students to be looking out for that as they are reading, because I want them to try to weave it into their essay. And that's probably where I think there's a little bit of a disconnect. I use Space Cat. I know there's Soapstone, and Tim, I don't think you use either acronym, right?
I don't. Nope.
Okay, but that's okay because you still cover the same standards. But basically, what I have realized is a lot of kids can label the parts of Space Cat. So like speaker, purpose, audience, context, exigence. The space part is the rhetorical situation. They can identify it, but then they don't know how to work it into the essay in their commentary. And so that's where I think, for me, that's the biggest disconnect that I see on a regular basis.
Now, let me ask you a question here, Beth, right? Because I think that you and I also see that a lot of rhetorical analysis papers score a 1, 2, 0. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about commentary, I do think that there might be just one word that if we saw a little bit more often in the commentary, we could be like, all right, you're moving towards a 1-3, and you're most likely going to be moving towards a 1-4. If you could do it and actually provide the right information after. Beth, mm-hmm. Can you tell us what kids could probably do to bump their score almost overnight? Assuming we're thinking about the same word. That's it. Yes. Yes. So, folks, one of the things that happens is we're reading and kids talk about things as if they're obvious, right? And for the reader, this is what we're trying to do as educators and as English educators. We don't want you to say, and this would make the person sad, period. What we need you to do is we need you to say, and this would make the person sad because. And that word because is going to make you really think about, well, what is it that I know that would make, if I experienced this language, I'd be sad or I'd be surprised, or something along those lines. And that's the big thing here, folks, right? I can't tell you how many times I've seen a kid identify a good choice, even identify a good effect, right? So a kid's like, oh, so-and-so narrates a tragic story to get the audience to be upset. Cool. That's a great topic sentence. And then it comes in and the evidence is there. And then the student says, and this is what makes the audience upset. But I need to know, how does it make the audience upset? And that's what we're talking about here. Or if you say that so-and-so includes this type of information to make him seem like a more credible source of it, a more credible source for whatever, well, great. How does it actually do so? So kids can do a decent job identifying what they're looking for, but it's that how. And most of the time, the sentence just becomes, and this makes him seem Like he's learned about that. Okay, but how? And that's where the word because comes. Now I have students, and I'm working on this with my freshmen right now that I have, and they're struggling with their commentary a little bit. And I'm like, well, listen, if you don't know what to put after the word because, just try to put the word typically after the word because, and that can help. Now, Beth, you and I both, of course, have videos about way like templates and stuff that can really help kids with this as well. But we're doing a live review. We've got anywhere between 11 and 20 minutes left, and so we could direct you to our videos as well. But the easiest thing for kids to do to better their commentary from day one is to make sure the word because shows up in your first sentence of commentary. But what are some other language that can show up in commentary, Beth, that can help us out?
One of the ones that we see quite often is the verb shows. So I tell my students I want them to use better verbs than that. There's nothing wrong with it. It's overused and it's a little bit simple. So words like highlights, illustrates, emphasizes. I used to love underscores, but now that's kind of like a chat GPT thing. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, but words
Yeah.
like that, showcases, I guess kind of works. But
Well,
you
to
said,
be clear, just real quick though, the word underscore is a synonym for emphasize. So I know
yeah.
that a lot of times people don't like associate those two because it says underscore, but it
Mhm.
means emphasize. So folks, you might want to consider adding that to your repertoire. Sorry, Beth, didn't mean to interrupt. Well, no,
Oh no,
I
you're good.
did, but I ask that you forgive me.
And actually, underscores has been in multiple choice a few times, but
Yeah.
as the like main verb. So it's good for students to know that.
Oh, you know
I
what though, Beth? Just real quick, someone just was a little bit upset for because he or she said that the word shows is used a lot of times in that person's writing, and the truth is, folks, shows works. You could
Mhm.
easily say, by describing it in this manner, it shows that people should become upset because, like, that works. Beth is just saying there are better verbs. It's the same thing like when kids use the word use for me. I'm like, why would you ever use the verb use when you could say include or incorporate or repeat or there or compare or contrast or narrate? Like these are way better verbs, or even the word present is
Yes.
better than the word use. And so we're just trying to give some tips and some suggestions here.
Yeah, basically, what we see oftentimes is students overuse the word shows, probably because when you're writing under pressure, you just kind of want to get the thoughts out there. So, not saying we can't do it, it's just that we want to try to enlarge our vocabulary and use synonyms when we can. But one of the things that Tim just kind of went over without really saying so that I think is super important is he basically just listed a bunch of rhetorically accurate verbs. And
Yeah.
those also help your writing. And some of the verbs he gave would be really great, especially if you're like, I don't really see any rhetorical choices. Like, a lot, my students are like, oh, I love it when there's repetition because it's really obvious. And that's
Yeah.
true, but repetition's not going to be in every passage, right? So the verbs that he gave, like presents, acknowledges, includes, mentions, kind of works. Sometimes it's a little bit casual, but it works.
Yeah.
Narrates,
Yep.
and even like compares and contrasts. Those verbs will also strengthen your writing. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily like automatically going to get you a higher score, but it'll be a step to stronger writing for sure.
100%. And somebody actually asked, what does quantifying mean? Because the person sees that kind of show up a lot, especially multiple choice. I know we're on, more on rhetorical analysis right now, but quantifying means, folks, to make something a quantity. So if I were like, man, Beth Hall was my best friend. How do I quantify that? Well, friendship is an idea. And so if I want to quantify that, I'm like, and you can tell because I give her a present on every birthday and every holiday. And then I call her when I find out that her son has had an awesome baseball game. And I'm like, Beth, this is awesome. And then sometimes she calls me and we're like, let's talk about AP Lang stuff. Now, folks, this is not really what happens, but we can pretend. What I'm doing is I'm giving concrete examples to the idea that Beth and I are friends. That's what it means to quantify something, to give a concrete example for something. Good.
Yes. And I think it's a teacher who brought this up in the chat, but it says make sure you answer the prompt as well. We saw this during the RA scoring last year, and that is absolutely true. I think one of the things that I have my students initially do at the beginning of the year, by now we're kind of moving away from it, but I'll have them like underline essentially the task, like whether it's message, argument, or purpose. Those are the three words that you're going to be asked about, students. It's going to say achieve a purpose, convey a message, or develop an argument. And they've chosen whichever one they give you based on the passage and which one's most appropriate. But all passages are going to have a purpose. And we want to make sure that we're actually answering the question being asked. Because I have seen that where sometimes we focus way more on the choice and the evidence and not really actually answering the question. So I think that was a good tip as well.
Yeah, and where that comes from, folks, is a lot of times the passage will say, analyze analyze the rhetorical choices the author makes to convey, his message about, his message about the steel companies. So you ask yourself, what is his message about the steel companies? Then you find some evidence that shows you what that message is, and then you label them as rhetorical choices. So one thing here, Beth, that came up, there are two questions that are actually good here. One of them is, I've got three, to be honest with you. One of them is, what's the best way to find rhetorically accurate verbs? Do you mind if I start answering this one, and then you can
go ahead.
fill in? All right. So, folks, one of the best ways to find rhetorically accurate verbs is to, first of all, you need to think, what is someone doing? But if you want to find some to have some in your back pocket for test day, if you think about methods of development, okay? Now you might say, what does that mean, Freitas? I don't have a rhetoric degree. Methods of development are ways that people write. One of the ways is narration. Well, I can easily turn that into a verb, narrate. So if I'm ever reading anything and I see someone telling a story, I can say, oh, so-and-so narrates, blah, blah, blah. That's the choice that the person makes. If I notice that there's some examples, I might turn exemplification, which is a way that people talk, into exemplifies. If I know that there's some description going on, I can just turn that into a verb and say, oh, there's description here. Oh, wait, that's describing. I could say so-and-so describes. Another good one is if you find like a simile or a metaphor, it's very easy to say, well, what are we doing with the simile or metaphor? We're comparing or we're contrasting. So we can just pick. We're comparing here. We're contrasting here. So all of these kind of methods of developments can easily be turned into verbs, without a lot. Even if you're used to finding, devices like parallel structure. Well, what does parallel structure do? It repeats certain sentence structures. So now you've got a really good rhetorically accurate verb. Repeats. And Beth and I have a bunch of videos about something like this. And just so you know, Alexi, I'm more than happy to go to about 8:20 like Beth and I normally do. But Beth, I'm not going to keep you here if you don't want to be here for that. I'm still sorry about my technical difficulties. And Alexi, you don't have to stay if you don't want to either. That's fine. We appreciate what you do. Beth, do you want to fill anything else about those rhetorically accurate verbs before I go to the next question that was asked about this?
No, I think that's really good. Just students, make sure that you're using them correctly. That is something that we sometimes see is people use a word that they think sounds good, but it's not accurate. But those are really good. And I think in different ways, Tim and I both have videos that mention these verbs. So a lot of times students will ask us like, can you make a list of the most common choices? And there are some that we see more often than not. But just being able to use these verbs correctly, you're conveying the choice. So,
And actually, you know what, Beth? I'm going to check this out right here, and I'm going to actually, I have to actually mention this anyway. But in the description for this particular video, there's a link to like a kind of like help sheet. And the help sheet that I created, I'm trying to see if I can find a copy of it in here. Do I have it? Oh, yeah, it's a YouTube live review sheet. And it actually has the rhetorical analysis reading questions that I said you should keep in mind, and it has, templates and whatnot. But I also, in there, I do believe that I have a list of, here we go. The best rhetorical choice verbs: presents, describes, narrates, exposes, incorporates, includes, details, refutes, challenges, focuses on, repeats, and exemplifies. So that's right in the document. It's free. It's right down below in the description. You got to scroll down a little bit and you'll see that kind of review thing. It also has good effect verbs. So if we're trying to say what's the effect of this particular part of the reading, does it highlight? Does it showcase? Does it emphasize? Does it reiterate? Does it promote? Or does it evoke an emotion? And so we do have that down there. I'll put those effect verbs in the chat as well, but that is on the sheet. that you can find in the description. Good. Now, I bring up this sheet for just a moment, though, because there's kind of an elephant in the room for anybody that pays attention to the news that I want to just make sure that I deal with. The sheets and examples that I've given to you are about my rhetorical analysis examples that I've made in videos in the past that have been about a Cesar Chavez prompt that the College Board released, and it was in 2015. If anybody follows the news, they know that that's now, well, Cesar Chavez is not necessarily the esteemed figure that he once was. And I just want to let people know that I am going to remake all of my rhetorical analysis videos to celebrate a different American icon. But because we're still so close to test day, there's still good content in there, even though the person has been, Cesar Chavez has, been kind of, well, there's been some scandal surrounding him in the news. And I want to be respectful to people, but I also can't make 12 new videos in a week. So for next year, we're going to remake all those videos with a new prompt, with a new American icon, or actually with a new public icon. And a new speech or something like that. So I just want people to know that. Okay. Anyway, Beth.
There was a question about basically building off of what you said. How does that apply to logos, ethos, pathos? So I put a link to one of my older videos about writing about appeals. And I believe you have one as well, Tim, right?
Yeah, Lexi, if you can find my video, my most recent one about writing about ethos, pathos, and logos, and drop that in the chat, that would be great too. Now, Beth, I'm not going to try to keep you longer than we have to, but are you okay with going about 15 minutes longer or no?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
So I want to address two questions here because one of the things that we haven't talked about, and actually I only saw it come up once, which is amazing. We have a sophistication point question. So we might as well address it. But before we do, I also have a question here about the conclusion. And the conclusion, so yeah, Lexi, if you can put the clip in there, if you can find the video for ethos, pathos, logos for me, and then Beth, if you put your link in there, you said. But let's do the conclusion one first, okay? And then let's do, thank you, Lexi. And then let's do the sophistication point one, okay? So the sophistication point question is very much what's the easiest way to get it, which I think is kind of a paradox, or at least not even a paradox. I'm not sure that actually works, the easiest way to get it. But the conclusion one I think we can deal with first. So Beth, what's your recommendation for a conclusion on test day for a rhetorical analysis? I'll answer that, and then we'll deal with sophistication, and we'll sign off for tonight.
Okay, so the first thing you have to ask yourself is, do I have enough time to write a conclusion? Because these essays are technically a rough draft. So I tell my students, if you have to choose between finishing a body paragraph well to earn those evidence and commentary points, because we want to be consistent, or the conclusion, you should choose the body paragraphs. So with that aside, let's say we do have time for a conclusion. What we see a lot of times are these really simplistic conclusions. Sometimes they're one sentence where it's like, and these are the choices that so-and-so made. That to me is not super effective. I would rather students kind of push beyond and so I give my students 2 question stems to try. I'm not going to say that these work for every single prompt, but they are pretty versatile for my students. One is, if the prompt asks about message, you can ask yourself, how is the message relevant today? And so basically it's kind of situating the issue in a broader context, which is an element of sophistication, but it's kind of zooming out in the conclusion. And then the other question, I'm trying to think of how I word it, but it's something to do with looking at how is the passage historically relevant, which doesn't apply to every passage, but it's kind of, again, trying to situate it in a broader context. I do have a video, and I'm sure Tim does as well, about rhetorical analysis conclusions that gives these questions and gives samples for those that want a more step-by-step process. But I would say if we're trying to write a good conclusion, an effective one, we don't want to necessarily merely restate our thesis. That can be helpful, especially if we're not so sure that it was defensible in the first place. But a one-sentence conclusion that is just another thesis, to me, is not super effective. Whereas if we can build out that conclusion more, then that would be more impressive. But again, if we don't have time for that, I tell my students, if you don't have time, end your last body paragraph in a way that tries to wrap up the essay, so it at least feels finished, even if it doesn't have a conclusion.
Yeah, I agree. I do really try to push my kids towards producing conclusions, and that's what we practice in class. But you're right, it's not going to take points away from evidence and commentary if they don't have one. And so we want to be real. We want to be real about that. Mm-hmm. For me, for the conclusion, I want to address another question that shows up in here. But for me, for the conclusion, every conclusion for me goes through 3 steps. It's the learning process: knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. And so because of that, what happens is the first sentence of a rhetorical analysis conclusion will say, what's the knowledge that the speaker's trying to convey, right? So this might be, it's going to be the only part of your conclusion that might borderline summarize things, but it's going to be more of a purpose element, right? So it'll say, so-and-so throughout the piece does this. What's the overarching kind of purpose of the piece? Then my students will typically start their second sentence with, in a world where, and then what that does is, okay, so if we know this from this person's piece, how do we understand this in our daily lives? So in a world where these kind of things go on, here's why this message is important. And then the last step is the wisdom part, where it's, okay, if I can understand this and how this fits in my world, what should I do with that as a person? So I do have videos about how to do that for rhetorical analysis, for argument, and for synthesis. That's there. Somebody asked, is there any way besides AP Classroom for links for good practice sites that you might, for what you can see on the exam, to practice exam timing and whatnot? The truth is, right, I'm going to just tell you right now, but I'm a little bit self-interested in this, but it's one of the ways that we keep things free. And that is, I actually have a full review guide for y'all. And it's one of the few things that I actually charge for, because my wife and I put over 1,000 hours into it. It has videos and worksheets that go through the entire course and exam description. It has videos for all of my worksheets for all my YouTube videos, so you can make sure you're focusing on things. It has 2 practice exams in there. It has a connection to other parts where you can take an exam with applied practice if you want to do one that's online and have them score it for you and things like that. So if somebody wants practice for things like that, if you're going to spend money on 5 steps to a 5, why not actually just support the Garden of English? But that's up to you. There's no guilt trip here. I'm just saying, like, if you're going to do 5able or 5 steps to a 5 or pay for anything else, what we have is probably less expensive anyway, and it's really, really thorough, and it's really, really good. But anyway, so somebody asked, can we avoid summary when producing commentary? You and I already told people what to do: cause and effect language. If you want to avoid summary, use the word because. But let's finish up, Beth, by talking about that sophistication point for our last 10 minutes here.
Okay, so I think the question was something to the effect of, like, what's the easiest way or the best way to earn it? And I think that kind of depends, but I will say that the most common way that I've seen students earn it, and that might just be how I teach it, but even at the reading, I feel like if I gave the sophistication point, it was for broader context. That was the one I saw the most. So there's
Okay.
broader context, there's their style, and then it's not nuanced argument. How do you word the last one? It's like
it's broader context, it's the writer's style itself, and the writer making effective rhetorical choices, which is basically this kind of stylized one as well. So
vivid and persuasive style is what.
Yeah, vivid and persuasive style. There we go. Yeah.
So the one I see students earning it for the most, I would say, is broader context, which again is kind of based on the student's understanding of the rhetorical situation and really digging deeply into it. I have a video on my channel about rhetorical analysis sentence frames, and this kind of goes back to somebody else's question about, like, how do you reference parts of the rhetorical situation without using the names? And I think there are a couple people in the chat giving good suggestions as well, but you really want to be connecting to that rhetorical situation, like basically answering, why does the writer make this choice for this audience on this occasion? And so that's what I give it for the most often. I do have some students who I feel have that vivid and persuasive style. I think there's certain tips that we could give you, but some students just have a stronger writing voice than others. So in my classroom, what I have them start with is we talk about how to use punctuation meaningfully. So using a colon effectively, dashes, appositive phrases. We also talk about adjectives and adverbs because students often forget to put those in their writing, or at least my students do. And then we talk about their vocabulary and like avoiding certain lower level words and trying to use more sophisticated language. And this takes time. Like, could you focus on this between now and the exam? Sure. But there might be better things to focus on. But I do think some students have that natural writing voice that kind of just sets them apart. But if you don't feel like that's you, I would still focus on just choosing your words and your punctuation carefully just to become a stronger writer, whether you earn the sophistication point or not.
And it's funny because I've heard you say so many times that you feel like the broader context is like the low hanging fruit for that sophistication point. And I actually firmly believe it's the vivid and persuasive style, because I think that that's so much easier for me to teach because I'm not a history teacher, right? And so because of that, I'm like, well, I don't have all the time to always get into the background of things. But I agree with you. I teach my kids how to use dashes, semicolons, and colons correctly. And the truth is, folks, the most impressive piece of punctuation that you can show, that if you could show you can use, sorry, that did not come out clearly. The most impressive piece of punctuation that you can use to show that you have a sophisticated understanding and a purposeful writing style is the colon. Now, it doesn't mean you put a colon everywhere. It just means that you use it appropriately. And I actually think the best place for a colon is in the last sentence of a conclusion, where you write what you want to say, and then you put your colon, and then you finish it off. So I encourage you folks to really learn how to use the colon. What I require my kids to do, or at least I used to, I don't this year, but usually I require them in every body paragraph to properly use a semicolon and dashes correctly. That's a non-negotiable. They can only do it once per body paragraph, but they have to do it once so they can show that. I also teach my kids how to write sentences and then switch the parts around. And they switch the parts around to create some sentence variation. But I want you to think about this, folks, right? If you have well punctuated sentence variation, and you know how to integrate your quotes so that they flow with your own writing, and you don't just say in the text it says, then you've got some well-developed commentary with cause and effect language. And you can show that you can use dashes correctly in non-essentials and semicolons correctly. And then at the very last sentence, you show your reader that you can use a colon correctly. I'm like, man, that's thinking impressive. And those are things that I can actually teach and encourage in my classroom.
And those are controllable too. So for students who are trying to become a stronger writer, go find an essay that you've previously written or even just a body paragraph. And if you don't tend to use colons or dashes or appositive phrases, go back and revise, because with practice, it becomes more natural. My students, most of them I had in 10th grade and now 11th grade. We started this in 10th grade and now they use colons regularly, and not just to introduce a list. Like there's other ways to use it meaningfully as well, like Tim was saying. So anyway, it's something that you can practice. There was one question that I wanted to address quickly. Basically someone was asking like, what's the best thing to do to prepare? And then if you have other APs, like, should you focus on Lang? And so just really quickly, should you focus on Lang? It kind of depends. If it's your strongest subject, there's less to do. This is not like APUSH or AP Bio where you have a bunch of facts to memorize. This is a skills-based exam. So the way I tell my students to practice is, first of all, do the work for the class, right? Your teacher's going to guide you. But I think it's really important to be writing essays, not a ton of them, but my students definitely write essays. We revise, we try to learn from it. And so those are things you can do. And then I tell my students, now is a good time, if we haven't already started, to just kind of stay up to date on current events or news, or even just like topics of interest for the argument essay, because you don't know what prompt you're going to be asked. I think that is something that we can maybe help ourselves be more prepared for. But I always tell my students, start with something that interests you and kind of work from there. So those are like little quick things that I would do. If you know you're weaker in a certain essay type, I would practice that essay type. So it's not like APUSH, like I said before, you can't just cram for this. It's more skills based. So what you should be doing between now and the exam is having those conversations with your teacher, figuring out where you can improve, and really focusing on that in class too. A lot of this is covered in class, at least I would assume so.
Yeah. Right. And you also tell all your kids to go grab Lang support, right? Of course, right?
Honestly, that is my, like, I will say this because if I have tutoring students as well. I the only one I will ever recommend is Lang support because I've looked at the others and I don't like them. So and Tim, I get nothing from Lang support. Tim and I collab a
Yeah.
lot, but like it is the only if I had to buy something, and I'm not just saying this because he's on the live with me, it is the only one I recommend.
I want to just talk about two more things, Beth, if you're okay with that. Are you okay with two more?
Sure.
Okay. Lexi, I hope that you're okay. If not, that's okay too. So nonetheless, Mr. Sefik, shout out. I don't know if I got to Mr. Sefik yet, but shout out to Mr. Sefik. And then people are asking about citing sources in rhetorical analysis. Folks, I hate to admit this out loud, but on exam day, when you're writing your rhetorical analysis, when you're taking quotes from it, you don't have to put a citation in your rhetorical analysis. Now, does that mean that you don't cite your synthesis? No way. Cite your synthesis.
Oh, please cite your synthesis.
I
It's
know.
terrible
You
when they
have to
don't.
cite your quotes. I know. But with rhetorical analysis, because there's only one reading, we know where the information is coming from when you quote it. And so because of that, for question 2 only, you don't have to cite it. Now, do I still make my kids cite it in class? Yes, I do. But you actually will probably save some time if you don't type in that extra citation when you're doing it on test day for the rhetorical analysis. I wish I could put some text above my face right now. It says for rhetorical analysis only.
And to
And so,
clarify, when you go to college, you need to check with your professor because they might have different rules. Because I tell my students that too. Like just because it's a rule in AP Lang doesn't mean it's a rule forever.
yeah. And so because of that, that's that. Now we are getting some questions more about argument and synthesis right now. They're kind of coming in, folks. This is not a day for argument and synthesis. Today was reading strategies and a day for really tech problems for me. And I'm super sorry, folks, but now I've figured out how to do this in my new location. So next time we won't have these problems. But the next time that Beth and I are going to meet is April 30th. And we're going to talk about synthesis and we're going to talk about argument there. Okay. And so because of that, that's when we'll deal with those types of things. And then the night before the exam, Beth and I typically have like an hour and a half of a free for all where it's like, yes, we'll try to address everything that we can, but know
Rapid
that you're not going
fire.
to learn everything overnight because you can't. The difference, Beth, I think you really said this really well. The AP English courses are courses where our content is our skills. So we can't memorize content and then practice that content with skills. It's actually developing the skills. So folks, if you're trying to do this, you want to practice. Now, I did get a question in here, Beth, about someone who's a STEM student. And this is where I think you and I can really be valuable to this student. So someone asked, hey, listen, I'm a STEM student, so I feel like I struggle in my humanities. What can I do for help? And folks, this is why Beth and I have so many videos that deal with templates. Because the way that the templates are set up for you is we give you the linguistic structures to logically map your way through how to respond. And that right there can really help the student who's very much more kind of that STEM-oriented student to make it through. I once was tutoring a student who was incredibly STEM-oriented. One day he was like, you know why I like having you as a tutor? And I said, why is that? And he's like, because you teach English like math. And I was like, I'm down. I'm totally down with that. But Beth, do you have any recommendations for that student who brought up the STEM part before we sign off here tonight?
Yeah, so the templates are great. I call them sentence frames. And so if you search for Coach Hall writes sentence frames, I have a couple videos and other resources that I think will help. It's a guide. It's a way for you to take the ideas that you have and better articulate them. So it's not cheating. It's just a support that I think can be really helpful. And Tim has others. Some of ours are similar, but we do have different ones, and you can kind of pick and choose what you like or what fits best. So I would definitely encourage you to search for those things. There was one question that I want to answer super quickly. It was about
Yeah, of
basically
course.
like something about like paraphrasing if the quote is too long. Please,
Yeah.
guys, try to use shorter quotes. And I think I've heard different things like no more than 8 words or no more than 11.
Yeah.
But try to
There's
like
always an exception, but you're right.
yeah, like try to choose like oftentimes there's a shorter phrase in the long quote. Usually when students have these huge quotes, there's fluff that we can just kind of omit anyway. So if you have this like 20-word quote, shrink it down and zero in on like the most important words, think about like connotation and stuff like that. I tell my students who are struggling with this, like they tend to want to choose a complete sentence. And I'm like, no, 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 like we got to choose a fragment. It's easier when you're learning to embed your evidence, it's easier to embed a fragment than it is this prepackaged complete thought. So I know that might not be the most helpful thing without an example, but if your quote is too long, I guarantee you there's a key phrase in there that's really important, and the rest could probably just go anyway.
Right. And you know what, Beth? I actually really appreciate how you're wording that, because it reminded me of a way that I used to deal with this with my students. I had a friend named Mike Van Walde who's excellent, by the way. And I'm just going to put some. I'm just going to display some of the sponsorship elements with link support and with supported, if you don't mind. But nonetheless, as we're finishing up, my friend Mike Van Walde used to tell me it's like making a tuna sandwich when you're dealing with quotes. And that is when you do this, sorry, I'm trying to do like 6 things right now. When you make your quotes, when you make a tuna sandwich, you drain the water to only get the meat that you want. And he was like, that's exactly what's going on when you're adding quotes in, when you talked about how you want to get that snippet in there. So that's really good advice for, don't paraphrase, get the quote in there, but get it in there with your own words. It's going to really help a lot. Yeah. Any other questions you want to deal with before we go?
I think we've answered just about all of them. If we didn't get to your question, we apologize. If it's synthesis or argument related, please come back on the 30th, same time, same place, and we will address those. And then, like Tim said, we do something the night before the exam as well. And then, of course, obviously, we have other resources as well. But y'all have been really great in the chat. We tend to see a lot of the same questions, and y'all ask some that we've never seen before. So
I
thank you
know.
for that. Like, that's really exciting for us too. Not that repeat questions are a bad thing, but it shows that you all are engaged and you care. And so I want to not only shout out the students, but I want to say thank you to the teachers as well for recommending this and supporting us, because clearly, based on what I'm seeing in the chat, y'all are doing a great job as teachers and you have some wonderful students.
I know, honestly. And folks, I do apologize for the technical difficulties on my side. Thanks for putting up with that. We'll fix it for next time. And I just am so honored that you would allow Beth and Alexi and me to be part of your education. That's kind. We really want to support. Please make sure that you drop comments on our videos. To be clear, Beth's YouTube channel is linked in the description down below this video as well. So you want to make sure that you subscribe to her as well, as we try to support you as best we can. And we'll see you all on April 30th. Beth, anything else as we finish up?
I think that's it. Just thank you all for your support. And please, if you need something AP Lang related, check out Garden of English on YouTube. And you also have Instagram, right? And then I have Instagram.
Yep.
I'm on TikTok as well.
Also, you're on TikTok too, right?
And that's shorter form content. So if you guys like quick answers like that, then please check that out as well. But anyway, thank you all so much. And we hope to see you on the 30th to talk about synthesis and argument.
Awesome. All right. I appreciate y'all. I'm going to shut this down. Beth, if you or Lexi, if either of you need to clarify anything with me, just shoot me a call once I shut this down. And other than that, until next time. Have a good one, everybody. Lexi, thanks for turning your camera off. I think that actually helped with the bandwidth too on my side. So, all right. Bye.